Okay, so logistics services, we've talked about transportation, we've talked about warehousing, and I've already hinted at the fact that warehousing often the especially the public warehouse providers often provide services that go well beyond just storing goods. So logistics services are all those auxiliary services that go beyond the transportation and the storing. And so we start by talking about third-party logistics services. That's where we outsource basically the transportation, the warehousing, and a whole bunch of other functions to a specialized company. We think that, hey, we're experts in our own field, but bringing or moving the goods either to us or from us is not our core expertise. And so we work with companies who specialize in this. That helps us provide reliable and timely delivery, especially if our goods cross borders, and we move items into foreign locations. Uh, Specialized services just know how to do that better. And the smaller companies are, the more likely it is that they use third-party logistics services because big companies, may get a department that specializes in these sorts of things, but little companies generally um, look for this type of network optimization, sometimes light manufacturing and those other services, and it helps firms to concentrate on their core competencies, which means that the demand for third-party logistics services is really growing quite rapidly. And the interesting way is the interesting fact is that in figuring out how to work with a third-party logistics services is done in a mix of quantitative and qualitative factors and evaluating those. So this must hopefully ring a bell to you when thinking back about when we talked about forecasting. Again, we look for the data where we have it, but there's other factors that come into play. And the most common technique here is the weighted factor analysis. Weighted factor analysis is a um, decision tool that can be really widely applied, where you first figure out, okay, what is important to me? And so that's essentially a brainstorming session. And then you figure out, okay, these are the items that I have decided are important for my situation, in this case, for my logistics needs. And then you make a choice, okay, of this list that I've developed, which one is the most important? And you assign weights per uh, category and say, well, reliability might be 50%, price might be 30%. Those sorts of weights are assigned. And then you can go around and look at different alternatives and say, okay, now I can assign scores for each alternative. You find that one company offers a very reliable service, another company offers a very cheap service. Usually you can't get both, and the factor analysis will help you decide, okay, on the whole, which is the best package deal for you. And so when we're looking at which third-party logistics services we choose, we can obviously look for only the best performing service providers, and those tend to get a bigger share of your business. Um, and what that results in is usually better levels of service. And if your volume is large enough, it can also potentially mean lower prices if you give more of your business to one company. Um, and you can use this amount of business as leverage when you start negotiating pricing and so on. So the third-party logistics services are the first one. The next one are sort of the other uh, transportation intermediaries, where they actually might not own any significant logistics capital assets. So it's not the companies that own the trains, own the trucks, own the planes, but they are beneficial providers for small companies with sort of limited logistics expertise, and in some cases, actually, large ones that have very specialized or great logistics needs. So the intermediaries here are, uh, you know, freight forwarders. They don't necessarily own the trucks, but they are looking to bring the different shipments together, small shipments, and combine them into large shipments. Then uh, there's brokers that simply say, okay, you have a shipment. I'll find you a shipper that is that is the right solution. And often we have associations working to uh, sort of present the interests of the various players in this. And in some cases, intermodal marketing companies, while they don't own, let's say, the trains or the rail line, they might purchase sort of blocks of capacity and say, well, if you want to have product shipped from Montreal to Vancouver, from Vancouver to Montreal, you can have a rail car on the train that leaves Vancouver next week, Friday, and it's going to cost you this much. So a number of quite specialized players in here help facilitate the overall business. And um, again, when we're looking at where, how do what type of impact do all these services have on our business and on our environmental footprint? You look at this and say, okay, moving goods around, storing goods, all of these things may have really significant footprints. So, those footprints come with hard costs. And so usually environmental sustainability and logistics is quite closely tied to making sure that you have an efficient operation, because all these things that have a big carbon footprint also tend to have an associated price tag that is in a direct causal relation. So the good news about environmental efforts in logistics is that um, companies have more incentive than just their environmentally ethical approach to business to be at the forefront here, because usually sound environmental efforts also save money. The first one is, the reduction of empty miles that decreases the carbon emissions by ensuring trucks only move when full. So, in the an example that I've learned about this was a European example. So, just like we get our early season strawberries from California, the early season strawberries in Europe come from southern Spain. And so areas in northern Europe often look for the time when all the trucks bring fresh strawberries from Spain, because those trucks have to go back. And they're looking for freight to go back because they want to reduce these empty miles. And so it's a win-win situation when that can happen. Um, I, horizontal cooperation, collaboration is often when you work with um, what might otherwise be a competitor, when you say like, okay, we have a certain market activity because we only together are we large enough to, let's say, fill a full container, to have certain activities at an efficient level. Um, There are independent programs like the Smart Waste Certification Program that helps certify reduced transportation emissions. And there are, depending on the jurisdictions, various industry-wide efforts. In the US, it's the Coalition for Responsible Transportation that works with US ports to implement clean truck programs. And in general, the 3PLs in Europe and the ports in Europe are leading the green efforts. And again, that is very largely driven by the fact that most of the factor input costs, the gas, the heating, the energy, are just more expensive in Europe. So it makes not only sense from a corporate social responsibility perspective, but also from a financial standpoint to try and minimize those costs. Okay, but certainly what you will have realized by now, this is a complex set of tasks. So we need help. Um, they are generally logistics software apps are added to ERP software suites of applications. Um, and there are three different ones, three popular ones are first of all the transportation management system that helps you find carriers, selects the best mix of transportation services and pricing, and helps you sort of manage your transportation contracts and so on. Um, very orientated towards the actual movement of goods. Then probably more widely known as WMS, the warehouse management systems that help reduce distribution center labor costs. They'd help streamline the flow of goods, and help make sure that your warehouse capacity is the right one. And it just helps reduce paperwork and manages that cross-docking process that I've mentioned, where goods come in and aren't even taken into inventory, but just broken apart from the incoming shipment, distributed into outgoing shipments, and then uh, leaving again right away. And the final one is a global trade management system that sort of helps provide a degree of visibility and especially standardization. Because when we're looking at working across borders, it helps if we can automate customs entry. It helps if we can make sure that we comply with international trade regulations in all the jurisdictions that our goods touch along the way, um, because that helps our transport move through smoothly. And this last one is a good segue to the greater topic of global logistics, because transportation across national boundaries introduces sort of a added complexity. The first one is for security. Um, and a big issue here is simply protecting for supply chains from terrorist activities, as hard as a thought as that is to recognize. We want to ensure the security of global supply chains in general and in international trucking and airline movement. And there's several customs trade partnerships against terrorism programs, the CT Pat. And if you've ever crossed the land border into the US, for example, you will see um, so-called fast lanes, and that's the free and secure trade program intended to make sure that shipping companies that work with the authorities to ensure their trucks and their shipments meet standards, that they get through the global barriers more easily. But it is one of the things when we deal with foreign partners, we don't know all the rules, and therefore we need specialized help by what's called global logistics intermediaries, and the list there is really quite long. So the first one that is very, very common is customs brokers. They move goods through customs and they handle the paperwork. If you have ever ordered something via UPS from the States, you will usually get some sort of documentation that shows you, hey, this has been handled, this has been presented to the customs authorities, and you don't have to look after it, but it does, of course, cost money to provide that service. Other companies are international freight forwarders that have specialized on moving goods to and from a foreign destinations. Um, then trading companies where they say, they handle the export and the import arrangements and sort of ensure that the goods are landed in the country of destination. So if you have a supplier that is in a different country, if you work with the trading companies, they would buy the product, bring it to Canada, and then you buy it from them so that it's a local transaction for you, which greatly facilitates that for you. And then another point that is quite often used in global logistics is so-called foreign trade zones. Um, every time we cross a border, paperwork starts to pile up and it's very, very complex. And realizing that there are zones around the world, most jurisdictions around the world have, or many jurisdictions around the world have zones like this that are sort of treated like they are and sort of not a full part of the host country. So there's foreign trade zones in the US, there's foreign trade zones in the Philippines, there's foreign trade zones in many different jurisdictions where moving goods in and out is easier. They are secure sites. They offer storage, they offer exporting, manufacturing, and so on. And all that with sort of a lowered barrier to move goods in and out. And then, of course, a really big topic is the is free trade agreements. This has been in the news quite a lot lately. CUSMA certainly being a big topic as of today, as I'm uh, recording this. We are a day or two away from the deadline where we will learn the fate of this free trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the US. And these free trade agreements are a key facilitator to ensure that goods can move more freely. Um, it's an interesting viewpoint. If you look in our textbook, free trade agreements are still sort of treated as unequivocally supported by almost consensus by everyone. But the philosophy has somewhat switched against that recently. So Canada, as you may be aware, is trying to expand their free trade agreement with other jurisdictions around the world because the free trade agreement with the US and Mexico might not be as enduring as this was once seen as sort of self-evident. All right, so that wraps up global logistics and brings me to a final point, quite literally final, so far we've mostly talked about moving goods from our um, suppliers down all the way to our customers. But reverse logistics sort of is the backwards flow of goods from the customers in the supply chain. Um, and if you think about it, returns have been increasing because of the growth of online shopping, because of the growth of direct to store shipments and the direct to home shipments. If you order, clothing from a manufacturer and you try stuff on and it doesn't fit, it goes back to the vendor. And if you want to see an order of magnitude here, even regular retail, they have returns that range from 6 to 10% of sales. So you may have tried things on in a store, but then you take it home and you try it on again. You don't like it anymore. You bring it back to the store. Online retail has this same number uh, reach 20 to 30% of sales. So a much higher number. And these returns have can have a direct negative impact on the environment, on the customer service, on the reputation, and also on the profitability, because it is really a lot of work to process all of this. Um, and this is one of the many ways that 3PL companies often participate in supply chains in this reverse logistics. And so the impact of a reverse logistics can influence how you view a brand. It might, if this is easy, you might have a better view than if this is hard. If the system can't handle returns, or if workers don't know how to do this, or it's unclear what's even in the box when packages are returned, or there are many different problems. So, a company might not even inspect or test returns when they come back. And so you want to avoid placing damaged returned goods back into sales stock. And so it's really an important part where if you have this, um, if you work to have an effective returns process, avoiding many of the examples that I've shared, you can create goodwill and you can enhance a customer's perspective of a product quality. But you can also use the information of, hey, we're getting so many of these particular things back. Let's check into what's going wrong there. If it's just unworn clothing that comes back because of sizing issues, then you can look at whether your size run is wrong there. But if um, items get returned as defective and certain reasoning keeps showing up, you might be able to look into your products and see how you can improve on that. And the important idea is that returns can still create value, either because you can look at them and say, okay, this is unused, we can use it as original product, or we can refurbish them and resell them, or they can be used as repair parts. So there is still life and money in there and value in there, which is why so many companies take great care to um, ensure that they have a good reverse logistics program. And again, as before, Green Reverse Logistics Program, they reduce the environmental impact on landfills and deal with dangerous contaminants. The fashion industry is first and foremost here. There is somewhere in South America, there is a landfill of clothing that you can see from space because it is such a poorly handled topic. But if goods are recycled, if materials and products are reused, if used products are refurbished, and if you use reusable totes and pallets, you can minimize the impact of this. And again, that saves you cost, but also is a very positive contribution to your business in general. So it is your profit oriented motivation going hand in hand with sustainability goals. All right, you've made it through chapter or through video 3 of 3 on the topic of logistics. So thank you very much, and see you again for a similar series for next week.